back to my channel, and congratulations! We're finally at the end of 2020, thank God. Today, we're going to be talking about Pixar's newest film, Soul. Let's end this year on a positive note. Before we begin, let me know in the comments if you were looking forward to this, or what your thoughts were if you've seen it already. And make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these reviews, because it helps me out immensely if you do that. Also, if you're new here and you like movies, please consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases and some classics. But now, let's jump right into it. This focuses on Joe Gardner, voiced by Jamie Foxx, a middle school music teacher who feels stuck in life and unfulfilled from his job. When his soul is separated from his body, he escapes to a place called the Great Before, where unborn souls prepare for a life on Earth. There, he tries assisting a soul with a dim view of life known as 22, voiced by Tina Fey, in hopes that it will allow him to make his way back to his body. This is brought to us by director Pete Docter, who also co-wrote the script and is the man behind three beloved Pixar films, Monsters, Inc., Up, and Inside Out. And of those three movies, this film has the most similar vibes to Inside Out, and has already been compared pretty extensively to it. Pixar's a company that's become known for diving a little deeper into ideas and making them much more complex than we ever thought they could be. Toy Story managed to make 4 emotionally complex films about toys brought to life. Monsters, Inc. brought to life the feelings of the monsters we were all afraid of growing up. Inside Out literally brought our emotions to life, and similar to that film, Soul brings to life another aspect of us, this time being, well, our souls. Though, before we jump into the thematic elements of this, I just want to bring up some things on the tactical side first. Pixar's animation, once again, is absolutely stunning, and it's incredible how far they've come from their early days. Last 2 out of their 3 films take place, at least partially, in the real world, and the amount of progress they've made is most noticeable in those films. In both Toy Story 4 and this film, there are times where the backgrounds look completely realistic. This takes place mostly in New York, and there are times where Joe is walking through the streets or he's in his apartment building, and for like a couple of seconds it was briefly indistinguishable if that was actually animated or if it was something a crew went out and shot themselves. Like, it was amazing. The score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross is also incredible. These two are starting to become some of my favorite film composers. This was heavy on piano tunes with jazz arrangements composed by bandleader Jon Batiste, and this score was absolutely beautiful. There were some great arrangements that were a little synth heavy, and it gave me some very slight Nine Inch Nails vibes thrown in there for those who were fans of Reznor from his band, and I found it to be one of the more memorable scores from Pixar's films. Now, as I mentioned, while this film will receive a lot of comparisons to Inside Out, I'd say this is one of the most unique entries in Pixar's catalog, as it breaks away from a few things they're heavily known for. First is the amount of humor. Now, I will say, this film can be very funny at times. Not every single moment was a laugh-out-loud hilarious moment, but we do have some pretty funny characters here. Tina Fey is great as 22. She had the highest energy among all these characters, and there were some fun visual gags between her and Joe early on, as well as when we got a little bit of a look at her time in The Great Before. And I also thought her role as the film goes on, without spoiling anything, was also really well done. There's also Graham Norton as someone named Moonwind, who we see both in the Soul world, though we also see him while in his body, where he works as a sign twirler, which might have been the single funniest moment for me in the entire movie. You also have a bunch of characters who help run The Great Before. One is known as Terry, voiced by Rachel House, who's a frequent collaborator of Taika Waititi, who counts the souls going into the Great Beyond and is the closest we get to a full-on antagonist, and she was quite funny. She was almost to the point of a little cartoonish, but it worked well. And you had a number of characters, including 2 voiced by Alice Braga and Richard Ayoade, all known as Jerry, who were the various soul counselors throughout The Great Before, and there were some fun moments where we'd see them all interact. But the movie itself as a whole isn't as funny as most other Pixar films. Like, there's enough humor in there to definitely classify it as a comedy, but unlike a lot of their other films, the movie as a whole isn't played for laughs like every other minute. And that's by no means a bad thing, as it still gives us a very emotionally compelling story. I just say this is the most dramatic of all Pixar's movies, and I'm not saying it has the single most emotional moment in all of their films. Like, moments such as the first few minutes of Up, the Bing Bong scene from Inside Out, among others, still reign at the top, which is just a testament of how good the quality of the majority of Pixar's films are. But as a whole, the film ventures more into dramatic territory than any other Pixar movie. There are a lot more moments that are meant to be totally serious that outweigh the number of moments that are played for laughs. And as I said, there are still a great amount of moments played for laughs. The lines aren't going to be instantly quotable as other Pixar's movies. It's maybe not as witty, and I'd say the humor is more oriented towards visual gags. So if you're looking for that with this film, you'll be disappointed, but to be clear, the humor still ultimately works. Though this leads into the next way it breaks away a bit from other Pixar movies. Pixar, like many other animation companies, are consistently praised for having so many films that are equally as accessible to both children and adults. I wouldn't necessarily say this is one of those films, though. Now, kids will like it. I think they'll still get plenty out of it. They'll find it funny, the story will still be engaging to them, but the difference between how much a child will appreciate this versus how much an adult will appreciate it will be like night and day. Like, I grew up during the early days of Pixar. Everything up to and including The Incredibles were all released before I hit high school. And most of those earlier movies I absolutely loved. And there was only a slight increase in appreciation for them as I got older, mainly just picking up on some jokes I didn't get at the time. That was the only real way the experience differed. Otherwise, I enjoyed them a lot growing up, and I still enjoy them just as much, if not a little more, when I rewatch them now. This movie, though, I feel like if I saw this as a kid, I'd like it, but I wouldn't like it nearly as much as I would have when I see it now. Because this film can feel incredibly heavy, as it deals with some pretty sensitive topics. It touches upon death quite a number of times here, and it can feel even pretty existential at times. Like, there's a line from 22 early on where she says something to the effect of, "Nothing makes me want to live," even though we're talking about someone who's preparing to go to Earth rather than someone who's already alive, but it's still really sensitive stuff. And once again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing by any means that they're doing this. I certainly appreciate ambitious movies that take on bold topics and explore weighty themes such as this, but these are topics that not all younger audiences may have fully come to understand just yet. And even if they get it, there's a chance the film may not have its intended effect. So I don't think all younger audiences will appreciate this one the way they would, say, Toy Story or Inside Out. And as far as Pixar movies that handle death go, I'd say Coco would be a much more accessible movie to children than this. But now, another thing worth noting on that same note is that while the film heavily advertises its time in the great before, that's actually not the case here. I won't spoil how, for those who haven't seen it yet, but this film actually splits its time between New York City and the great before. It's roughly about the same amount, if anything maybe a 60-40 split leaning more towards New York. There's a twist that happens maybe about 45 minutes into the movie that I wasn't expecting whatsoever. And the marketing, as far as I'm aware, completely hides this, so it caught me totally off guard. And I think that'll be the case for a number of you. I think though, once you get over the initial shock of this moment, you'll be totally on board. It doesn't derail the movie by any means, at least for me. Though, for those of you who were expecting a more in-depth exploration into the afterlife, or pre-life in this case, you'll be a little disappointed there. But this twist ends up working to the movie's advantage. And that's because, despite all the talk about death and some of the more existential, heavier moments here, the film is meant to be more of a celebration of life than anything. The film discusses your purpose in life and trying to find meaning when you're not sure what that meaning may be. You have Joe, someone who's technically working somewhat in the profession he enjoys, but he's been working his whole life towards achieving more, and he still doesn't have that feel like he's accomplished enough, or that he's really doing what he wants. And then he gets contacted by a former student, voiced by Questlove, who gives him the opportunity to work with this jazz legend, voiced by Angela Bassett. And that's the first time in a long time where he felt any sort of fulfillment, and that he's doing something he finds meaningful, despite years of being a teacher. And in relation to all that, this film deeply explores his own life, his relationships, and how he's affected others. It's almost fitting that this was released on Christmas Day, even though it's not a Christmas movie by any means, but because of some of the themes it hits, it reminded me a bit of It's a Wonderful Life, which explores similar topics about the effects you have on others. And I found that to be very nicely done here. We explore more of the dynamics between him and one of his students, and there's one scene where someone he knows for a long time is asked about what they enjoy, and they say how much the conversation meant to them. And then there's one scene, which was hands down the absolute best scene in the film, where we see his mother, voiced by Felicia Rashad, and this conversation takes place, and due to the circumstances of that moment, it's an unusual conversation, but not only does the direction make this unusual conversation come off so smoothly, but it hits so many great emotional notes all through dialogue without any of it coming off as hokey exposition. And it was probably the most touching moment of the entire movie for me. Now, as I said, this film repeatedly dives into the impact one can have on others, and how maybe even if they totally didn't get to do everything they wanted to do, there's still so much to celebrate. And I think that's an especially appropriate theme given the current circumstances of the world, where everyone's not able to see all their loved ones on a regular basis or at all, or are. They're not able to do what they normally enjoy, and it allows you to think back on things you may have taken for granted and the things you do appreciate. And I think a lot of people will be able to get that out of this film. But I think it'll resonate with you even more so if you felt like you've been in that same situation as Joe in this movie, where maybe you feel stuck to the extent that he feels. Because in life, on one hand, there are people who know what they've always wanted to do. They have a plan for everything. Even if things don't immediately work out for them, they still know what their ultimate goals are. But there are others who, on the opposite end of that, maybe they don't know what their next step is. Maybe things feel unpredictable. You don't know where you want to go, and maybe if you do know where you thought you knew, things didn't work out, but now you're not sure where to go from there. I know I've personally been in that situation myself where I felt stuck, so the arc here especially resonated with me. I found the way it hit all those notes to be done wonderfully, and I feel like if you've been there before too, there's a good chance you may feel the same way, and it will add to your appreciation of the movie. Overall, this is another fantastic entry in Pixar's catalog. It's not as accessible to kids as it is for adults like many of their other films, but really that's not a bad thing because the film explores heavily themes surrounding death, but in the end it also acts as a celebration of life. And it'll resonate with you on so many levels. It contains stunning animation, a beautiful score, has a great screenplay, a wonderful voice cast, and excellent moments of emotional complexity. It's a film I think we all need right now, and it's another one of Pixar's masterpieces. Soul gets a 10 out of 10. So I absolutely love this movie, but since this has already been out a week by now, there have already been plenty of talks about it. A lot of it seems to lean in the direction of people saying it's great, but maybe not up there as one of Pixar's best. And I get why that's being said, especially as it's not the most family friendly or it's not as funny, but I really honestly think if you've experienced feeling the way the main character feels here, where you're stuck the way he is and you're looking for some direction, this will hit you even more so. Or maybe it won't. I don't know. That's what led me to thinking so highly of it, though. I figured I'd explain that a bit, as I know there can be some pretty passionate fan bases surrounding Pixar, among other movie companies and franchises. And for the record, by the way, I'm not saying this is Pixar's new best movie ever or anything. They have a lot of movies that would easily also earn that 10 out of 10 rating. It's just a testament of how high the quality of their films usually are. So let me know, did you see Soul, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you enjoy the story? Did you like the themes it touched upon? And what's your favorite Pixar movie? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. Plus, for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a happy new year, and I'll catch you next time.